I never thought my life would change during a graveyard shift at a gas station, but I guess that's how big things happen, on the days you least expect anything at all. It was 1:47 a.m. in Atlanta, Georgia, and the fluorescents above me hummed louder than the register. My back hurt, my eyelids felt heavy, and my bank balance was sitting at negative $43. I remember staring at that number earlier that night like it was a sentence handed down by some cosmic judge. The overnight shift was slow. Rain tapped lightly against the glass windows, and the whole place smelled like cheap coffee and tire rubber. Most customers were truck drivers, or people who didn't want to explain why they were awake at 2 a.m. And then there was me, Ethan, 29, college dropout, drowning in student debt, working 2 jobs and still behind on rent. Outside, parked under the dim security lights, was my car. A 1999 Honda Civic that rattled when the AC was on and leaked oil like it was crying. Everyone called it the junk, and honestly, I didn't even defend it anymore. That car had more rust than paint. The muffler hung lower than my self-esteem, and the driver's side door only opened from the inside, but it was all I had. It was the difference between having a job and being unemployed. I was wiping down the counter when a man walked in, clean-cut, quiet, dressed in a dark jacket and jeans that cost more than my monthly paycheck. He wore a baseball cap, and when he leaned forward, I caught a glimpse of a small kipper under it. He didn't walk like he was in a hurry. He walked like someone who always knew exactly where he was going. He grabbed a bottle of water, a protein bar, and handed me a 20. "Keep the change," he said, in a voice calm enough to shut off the storm in anyone's head. When he looked at me, it wasn't the condescending stare I was used to from wealthy customers. He studied things, tiny things. The grease under my nails, the hole forming in my sleeve, the exhaustion in my eyes. It made me uncomfortable, like he wasn't judging but understanding, and somehow that felt even worse. As he walked out, my coworker Leo whispered from the snack aisle, "Bro, do you know who that is?" "Nope," I answered, "just another guy with money." Leo shook his head, eyes wide. "That's David Stein, man. The guy who owns the whole tech park 2 blocks down, multi-millionaire, investments everywhere, real estate, AI, logistics. He's like crazy rich." I shrugged, pretending I didn't care, but something inside me twisted. Not envy, resentment. You know that bitter taste you get when someone has everything you've spent your whole life trying to get even a piece of. When David stepped outside, he stopped for a moment and looked directly at my car. I felt my cheeks burn. Even from inside, I could see the little half-smile curve on his lips. I pushed through the door and followed him, maybe because part of me was tired of being silent about my own humiliation. "You can laugh," I said, motioning to the Civic. "Everyone else does." He didn't laugh. He stepped closer, examining it like a mechanic would. "You drive it every day?" he asked. "Yeah, door sticks, engine knocks, but it still moves." He nodded, running a hand over the chipped paint and faded hood. "And you think that matters?" "It matters when you can't afford something better," I snapped. I hated how sharp my voice came out. "But I guess you wouldn't know about that." That was when he straightened up and looked at me, not with anger, but with a spark of curiosity. "You seem proud of your car," he said. "I'm not proud," I told him. "I'm surviving. Big difference." That half-smile returned as he glanced at his own ride. A brand-new BMW i7, silent and immaculate under the gas station lights. It looked like it came from a future where people like me didn't exist. Then he turned back to me and said something I didn't expect in 1,000 lifetimes. "If you can outrun me in that junk, my company is yours." For a second I thought I misheard him. "What?" "You heard me," he said calmly. "If you outrun me with that car, I'll give you my company." I laughed, but it sounded more like a choke. That's absurd. Maybe, he said, but absurd doesn't mean impossible. Leo, who had slipped outside without me noticing, nearly dropped the box of chips he was holding. Sir, are you serious? David ignored him completely. He looked at me like a chess player studying his next move. If you want the chance, come meet me tomorrow, 6 a.m., Industrial Park off Briarwood. If you don't show, I'll assume you're not serious about changing your life. He reached into his pocket, handed me a card with an address embossed in silver. Then he walked to his BMW, got in, and drove away as silently as a whisper. Leo smacked my arm. Bro? Did that just happen? Are you gonna go? I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the moment over and over. If you can outrun me in that junk, outrun him? In what world? The BMW could hit 60 before my engine even finished coughing. But then the other part of me, the stubborn, angry, tired of my life part, whispered, what if he's not joking? What if, for once, life was giving me something instead of taking something? Around 3 a.m., and I stepped into the kitchen where my mom sat in her robe, coughing lightly. Her illness made her age faster than she should have, and it always hit me like a punch. Couldn't sleep, she asked gently. No. Something happened at work. I told her everything, every detail. She listened quietly, sipping her tea like she was measuring each thought before letting it show. When I finished, she said, your father would have gone. I swallowed hard. Dad had been a mechanic, good with engines, better with people. He used to tell me, a car is just metal. What matters is the person holding the wheel. I missed him every day. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. You've been stuck for a long time, Ethan. Maybe this is your chance to move again. I nodded, but fear twisted inside me. What if it's some rich guy's joke? What if I look stupid? She held my hand tighter. You already feel stuck. What's the risk of trying? By 4 a.m., I was in the driveway with a flashlight, looking at my Civic like it was a wounded soldier I was trying to bring back from the dead. I tightened bolts, checked the oil, replaced a spark plug that had no business still functioning. My hands shook, partly from exhaustion, partly from something else, hope maybe, or desperation disguised as hope. Around 5:30 a.m. I stood back, wiped the grease off my hands and whispered, "Don't fail me today, buddy." The engine sputtered and growled when I turned the key like it was waking up from a long, unhappy sleep. But it started, and that was all I needed. I took a deep breath, backed out of the driveway, and headed toward the industrial district while the sky slowly shifted from black to blue. I didn't know it yet, but this ridiculous decision, this insane little race, was about to crack my entire life open, like a mirror breaking, revealing pieces of myself I had been avoiding for years. Whatever was waiting for me out there, it wasn't just a millionaire. It was a turning point, and I had no idea what was coming. On the way to the industrial park, the city felt different. Atlanta always had this grey, sleepy look in the early morning, like it wasn't sure it wanted to wake up yet. But that day, every traffic light, every empty street, every billboard felt like it was watching me, like the universe had pulled up a chair and was waiting to see what I'd do. I kept checking the time on the cracked screen of my phone. 5:48 a.m., 5:55 a.m., 5:59 a.m. My heart beat faster with every minute. My Civic rattled over a pothole, and for a second I thought the entire exhaust might just drop onto the street and end everything before it even began. Not today, I muttered, patting the steering wheel. Just give me this one day. When I turned into the industrial park off Briarwood, the sky was a pale blue-grey, the sun not fully committed yet. It was the kind of morning that felt like an in-between space, like reality hadn't fully clicked into place. The warehouses stretched out on both sides, big concrete blocks with loading docks and steel doors, the kind of place nobody thinks about unless they work there. That's when I saw him. David Stein was already there. He stood near the curb with his hands in his pockets, wearing a simple black jacket, jeans, and a plain white t-shirt. No flash, no expensive watch on display, no entourage. Just him and two cars parked near him. I slowed the Civic and pulled up, heart hammering. There it was, his BMW i7, looking like it had rolled out of a commercial. But next to it, there was another car. A beat-up 1995 Toyota Corolla, faded red, with mismatched hubcaps and a dent in the front fender. It looked tired in the same way my Civic did. Ordinary, used, very, very human. I parked and stepped out, trying to act cooler than I felt. "You came," he said, like he honestly wasn't sure I would. "You didn't think I would?" I tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. "Most people don't show up when life dares them," he said simply. "They complain, they dream, but they don't show up. You did." His eyes moved to my car, then back to me. "How'd it handle on the way here?" "Like an old man with bad knees," I said. "But it's still alive." He smiled slightly. "Good enough." Then he turned and gestured to the Corolla. "This one's mine today." I frowned. "You're not driving that." "I am," he said. "You thought you'd be racing a BMW?" "Kind of," I admitted. "That'd be like racing my bank account against a private jet." "Exactly why I'm not doing it." He leaned back against the Corolla. "If we're going to do this, it should be about the driver, not the money." His simplicity threw me off. I had expected arrogance, maybe a show of power. Instead, he just looked grounded, like he didn't have anything to prove. A tall guy in a hoodie was standing a few feet away, leaning against another car, a black SUV with tinted windows. He held a camera rig, the kind vloggers use. "That's Luis," David said. "He works with me. He'll film from a distance, just for record-keeping. No internet circus. This isn't a reality show." "So this is real?" I asked. "The company? The bet?" He gave me a long, measuring look. "The spirit of the bet is real. We'll talk about the details after we finish. First, you drive. Then we see who you really are." I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I nodded anyway. I'd already gone too far to back out. "What exactly are we doing?" I asked. "We're going to follow a loop," he said, pointing down the long, empty street. "We'll start here, follow Briarwood down to the light, take a right, go around the industrial block and come back here. You obey traffic laws. You don't put anyone's life in danger. You don't drive like an idiot. Clear?" "Clear," I said. "And if I win? Then we talk about ownership, partnership, and how much you're actually ready for." The way he said it made something in my chest tighten. It didn't sound like a fairy tale promise. It sounded like a contract with fine print written into reality itself. Luis walked over and clipped a small GoPro onto the hood of my Civic. "Just for angles," he said. "Don't worry, man. I'm not making a YouTube montage of your face if you lose." "Good to know," I muttered. David walked over and did the same with the Corolla. Then we both got into our cars. Inside, the Civic smelled like old upholstery, cheap fast food, and the faint trace of the cologne my dad used to wear. I pressed my hands to the steering wheel and closed my eyes for a second. People talk about prayers in churches or synagogues or temples. That morning, my prayer was whispered into cracked leather and a dashboard held together with tape and stubbornness. "Don't let me be a joke today." Not today. Luis stood ahead of us with one arm raised. The engines idled, uneven, a symphony of weary machines. David glanced over at me through his window. He didn't rev his engine, didn't try to intimidate me. He just nodded once, like a quiet acknowledgement. "We're both here, we're both awake. Let's see what happens." Luis dropped his arm. I slammed my foot on the gas. The Civic lurched forward, wheels scraping slightly before they found traction. The Corolla shot ahead too, but I reacted faster, getting a slight lead. The street stretched out in front of us, wide and open. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I could hear every rattle, every vibration, every complaint my car made, but it moved. God, it moved. For a moment it was just me, the road, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't insane. "Come on," I muttered. "You've got this. I've got this." The first turn came up faster than I expected. I eased off the gas, tapped the brakes, and took the corner carefully. I knew if I pushed too hard, the Civic could lose grip. This wasn't a movie. There were no stunt drivers or soft resets if something went wrong. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the Corolla taking the turn smoother than I did, as if David had already run this route 100 times. He didn't rush, but he didn't waste motion either. It was efficient driving, cold, precise, intentional. "He's good," I whispered. The streets were waking up. A delivery truck rumbled past on a side road. A few early workers stood near a bus stop, staring in confusion as two old cars sped past, like they were in some off-brand racing game. The second stretch of road was longer, with a slight incline. I pressed harder on the gas, feeling the Civic strain, the engine buzzing in protest. My dad's voice surfaced in my mind, as clear as if he was in the passenger seat. "A car isn't about perfection, kid. It's about knowing its limits. You push it just enough, not too much. Same with life." "I know, Dad," I said out loud, my eyes fixed on the road. "I know." I glanced in the mirror. The Corolla was still there, not too close, not too far. David wasn't trying to intimidate me. He was just present, matching the energy, reflecting it back. The route took us through a part of the park with more intersections, stop signs, cross streets, a few early cars. I could have bent the rules, rolled through instead of stopping completely, cut a corner a little sharper, squeezed a yellow light. But every time I got close to the line, something inside me pulled me back. Not fear of tickets. It was something else. A feeling that whatever this was, it wasn't just a test of speed. It was like the entire race was wired into something bigger, causes and effects waiting to fall into place. The world felt like a set of scales right then. Every decision like a weight. Halfway through, at a light, I ended up next to David for a short second. We both had red. I kept my hands on the wheel, trying to breathe. I could feel sweat on my neck between my shoulder blades. I looked over. He was relaxed. Calm hands, calm eyes, as if we were on our way to breakfast, not gambling fate. I frowned. "Why are you doing this?" I called out through my open window. He turned his head. "Because you think your life is about the car you drive," he said. "I'm curious if you're wrong." "You're insane," I muttered. The light turned green. We surged forward again. We hit the back stretch of the loop, the longest part. I knew after this we'd turn, head down a final lane, and circle back toward the starting point. My hands were tight on the wheel now, fingers cramping. The Civic shook when I pushed it a little harder, like it was reminding me, "Careful, there's a difference between moving forward and falling apart." As the road opened up ahead of us, something strange happened inside me. The tension didn't disappear, but it shifted. It was like everything slowed down a fraction, not in some movie slow-motion way, but inside my mind. I noticed more. The way the morning light bounced off the warehouse windows, the smell of wet asphalt. The faint sound of a siren in the distance, somewhere far away. The rhythm of the engine syncing with my heartbeat. It felt like the whole world was running on tracks laid down by invisible rules. Patterns, cycles, cause and effect chains stretching out in every direction. I wasn't just driving a car. I was making invisible choices that added up to something bigger. Every time I hit the gas, every time I braked, I wasn't just reacting. I was creating the next few seconds of my life. And behind me, in his old Corolla, so was David. I didn't know why, but that thought hit me harder than anything else. For the first time, the race didn't feel like rich versus poor, new versus old, winner versus loser. It felt more like two different versions of life colliding, one that believed it was trapped and another that knew it was steering. Then, just as I was about to enter the final stretch, I saw it. Up ahead, maybe 3 or 4 blocks down, there was a car pulled halfway onto the sidewalk. Smoke was coming out from under the hood. A woman stood next to the driver's door, frantically pulling at the back door handle. And inside the back seat, through the rear window, I thought I saw a small figure, a kid, in a car seat. My stomach dropped. "No!" I breathed. As I got closer, the scene sharpened. The woman's face was pale with panic. The front of her car was crumpled against a pole. The engine bay hissed and smoked. Her hands shook as she pulled and pulled at the back door, which looked jammed from the impact. She screamed something I couldn't fully hear, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it meant. Help. Time slowed again. Only this time, it wasn't peaceful. The Civic kept moving. I was still in the race. I was still, technically, fighting for a chance at a life I had only seen from far away. All I had to do was keep going, just keep driving. The finish line was somewhere behind that mess, somewhere past those screams, somewhere past that kid. My brain flooded with arguments. Someone else will stop. You can't throw this away. What if this is your only chance? What if he was never serious, and you're sacrificing what little hope you have for nothing? And then, underneath that noise, another voice spoke, quieter, but heavier. If you pass them, who are you really? What's the point of winning anything if this is who you have to be to get it? My foot hovered over the gas. The car moved forward on momentum alone. The distance between us and them shrank. I checked the mirror. The Corolla was coming up behind me, steady. This was it. This was the moment, a race between the two people I could be, the one who kept going and the one who stopped. I hit the brakes so hard the Civic jerked forward, seatbelt digging into my chest. The tires screeched against the pavement, and for a second I thought the entire car would stall out right there. The world snapped back into full speed as I threw open my door and sprinted toward the wreck. The woman looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Please, my daughter, she's stuck, she's stuck." Smoke curled from under the hood like a warning that time was running out. I glanced inside the back seat and saw a small girl, maybe 4 years old, crying but conscious. Her tiny hands pressed against the window. The back door was jammed from the impact. I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. "Step back," I told the woman. "Let me try." I wedged my fingers into the gap near the frame and pulled with everything I had. My arms shook, the muscles in my shoulders burning, but the door budged only an inch. The little girl's cries grew sharper, more panicked. "Okay," I whispered, mostly to myself. "Think." I ran around to the other side, checked the opposite door, also jammed. Smoke hissed louder now, and the heat coming from the engine made my skin prickle. I clenched my teeth, ran back, planted my foot against the frame, and pulled the handle with both hands. "Come on, come on, come on!" The metal groaned, bent, and then finally gave way with a wrenching crack. The door swung open just enough for me to reach inside. I unbuckled the girl with shaking hands, lifted her out, and cradled her against my chest as she sobbed into my shirt. The woman collapsed forward, crying in relief. "Oh my God, thank you, thank you!" She wrapped her arms around her daughter, and for a moment, everything else fell silent. The grief, the fear, the roar of engines in my head, all of it faded under the weight of that simple human moment. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 while guiding them a safe distance from the car. "This is Ethan," I said quickly. There's been a crash at Briarwood Industrial Park. 1 adult, 1 child. Car is smoking. Send EMTs now." The dispatcher asked a few questions, but my eyes drifted back toward the road, the race, David, the finish line. I turned just in time to see the Corolla slow down as it approached. I thought he would stop. I really did. But after a momentary hesitation, he kept going. He drove past us, slow enough to see, but fast enough to finish. The Corolla's engine hummed steadily as it moved forward, disappearing around the corner. A cold bitterness hit me in the chest. "So that's it," I muttered under my breath. "Righteous rich guy my ass." The woman touched my arm. "Thank you," she said again. "I don't know what would have happened if you didn't stop." I forced a small smile, but my stomach twisted. I wasn't thinking about the gratitude. I wasn't thinking about the ruined race. I was thinking about how stupid I felt, how predictable, how naive. I had stepped out of the only shot at changing my life. For what? A millionaire who didn't even slow down? A race he'd probably never intended to honor? A bet I had let myself believe in? The sirens grew louder. 2 fire trucks turned onto the street, then an ambulance. EMTs rushed over and took the mother and daughter away for evaluation. They asked for my name and I gave it, but I couldn't focus on anything they said. All I could think about was David Stein, and how he had driven right by. When everything was under control, I got back into my Civic. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. As the engine sputtered awake, I stared ahead at the empty street. I had lost. Not because I was slow, not because my car was old, but because I chose to stop. My chest ached with anger. At him, at myself, at a world that seemed designed to mock people like me. "Figures," I said bitterly. "A guy like him would never choose humanity over winning." I took a deep breath, wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, and pulled onto the road. The drive to the finish line felt like a funeral march. By the time I turned the last corner, David was already there. He leaned against the hood of the Corolla, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Luis stood next to him, camera lowered at his side. I parked hard, slamming the door so loud it echoed. I marched up to him, fury burning through every step. "You're unbelievable," I snapped. He didn't flinch. "You didn't stop," I said, voice cracking. "There was a kid in that car, a kid, and you just kept driving." He held my stare, calm, almost too calm. "You're angry," he said. "You think I shouldn't be?" I exploded. "You set this whole thing up, made me believe it mattered, and the first time something real happens, you just keep going like none of it means anything. Of course I'm angry." Luis shifted awkwardly, but David didn't look away. "Are they okay?" he asked quietly. I froze. "What?" "The woman and her child. Are they okay?" I blinked. They're with EMTs now." He nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "Good," he said softly. "That's good." But my anger still boiled. "You don't get to act relieved," I snapped. "You didn't stop. I did. And because of that, I lost the race, and whatever stupid test this was." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and held it up. On the screen was a paused video, my Civic stopping, me jumping out, running toward the wreck. Then he pressed play. The video continued, following me as I fought with the car door, pulled the girl free, called 911. Luis had filmed everything from a distance. Everything. When the video ended, David looked at me again. "You didn't lose the test," he said. "You didn't lose anything." My throat tightened. "What are you talking about?" He gestured vaguely toward the road behind us. "I didn't stop immediately because I needed to give you space to act without influence. If I had pulled over first, you might have second-guessed yourself. You needed the choice to be yours." My breath caught. "Choice?" "Yes," he said simply. A race only reveals who someone is when the stakes change. I shook my head. I don't understand. You said, I said, he interrupted, that if you outran me in that car, we'd talk about my company, but outrunning me physically was never the real race. The words hit me like a collision. What does that even mean? He stepped closer, not threatening, just present. Life isn't decided by horsepower, he said quietly. It's decided by decisions. I let out a humorless laugh. So what? This was all some moral test? It was a human test, he corrected. I wanted to see how you drive when the world shifts beneath you, when something unexpected happens, when the road stops being straightforward. I looked away, jaw tight. So you didn't care about the race at all? He shook his head. I cared very much. Because when something interrupted your path, you didn't push through it for the sake of winning. You paused. You helped. You acted like a man who remembers he's part of something bigger than himself. I swallowed hard, and if I hadn't stopped... He met my eyes. Then we wouldn't be having this conversation. My breath hitched. It wasn't pride in his voice, it wasn't arrogance. It was something quieter, something true. You were right about one thing earlier, he added. I frowned. What? He nodded toward my Civic. That car is surviving, and so are you. But surviving isn't the same as living. The words hit deeper than I wanted to admit. For the first time since the race began, the anger in my chest cracked, and underneath it, something more painful surfaced. Something raw, because the truth was, stopping for that little girl hadn't felt like losing. It had felt like remembering who my father raised me to be. David's voice softened. I didn't drive past because I didn't care. I drove past because I needed to see who you were when nobody was watching. When you thought winning still mattered. I stared at him, at a complete loss for words, and then he said something I will never forget, words that felt like the hinge the whole moment turned on. If you had kept driving, he said, I would never trust you with anything I've built. My chest tightened, my palms went cold. I felt something shift inside me, not because of his company, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone was seeing me, not as a loser. Not as some broke guy with a junk car, but as a man with choices, and the choice I made, the one that cost me everything, might have been exactly the one that mattered. I stood there in the cold morning air, breathing hard, sweat drying on my neck, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. David waited calm and steady, like he had all the time in the world, like he'd done this 1,000 times with 1,000 different people. But I knew he hadn't. This wasn't routine to him. This was intentional. Something in the way he watched me, not the Civic, not the race, told me that he'd seen something he was looking for. And the weight of that nearly knocked me sideways. I swallowed, trying to find my voice. So, what now? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past me and leaned against the Corolla, folding his arms. Luis stood a few feet away, quiet, respectful, like he knew a conversation was happening that he had no right to interrupt. David finally spoke. Tell me something, Ethan. Why did you stop? I blinked. What do you mean why? There was a kid. She needed help. What kind of person would just keep driving? He nodded once. Exactly. Some people wouldn't have stopped. You did. Without hesitation. You made a choice. I ran a hand through my hair, still frustrated. Yeah, and that choice cost me the race. No, he said calmly. It defined the race. I frowned. I don't get it. He pushed off the Corolla and walked closer again, his voice low and steady. You think life is won by speed, by getting ahead, by beating the next guy. But that's not how it works. Life is shaped by alignment. Alignment? I repeated. Yes, When your actions match your values, everything else eventually aligns around that. Maybe not instantly, maybe not in the way you expect, but it does. I shook my head. Man, you talk like a rabbi or something, he smirked. My grandfather was one, he said with a shrug. Some things stay in the blood. For a moment we just stood there in silence, the early morning sun finally rising above the warehouses and casting long shadows across the concrete. I felt the exhaustion hit me like a wave, the sleepless night, the race, the rescue, the anger, the confusion. I don't understand why you're doing all this, I said quietly. David tilted his head. You think I'm testing you, but maybe I'm offering you something. I crossed my arms, defensive. Like what? The company? He chuckled, not mocking, genuine amusement. You really think I'd just hand over a multi-million-dollar company because of a race with a couple of old cars? I looked down, embarrassed and angry at myself for believing it even for a second. Yeah, I guess that was stupid. No, he said gently. It wasn't stupid. It was hopeful. And there's a difference. Something stung behind my eyes. I blinked it away. He continued. I'm not giving you the entire company. That wouldn't help you. I've seen people get wealth too fast. It destroys them. You need foundation before you get walls. Then what was the point? I asked, tired. This, he said, pointing directly at my chest. To see if the person you are today is someone who can grow into the person who deserves responsibility. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He stepped closer. I want to make you an offer, not charity, not pity, a deal. Louise straightened, listening. I took a breath. What deal? I want you to work with me, he said plainly. A real job. Full-time, something that uses your brain, not just your body. You'll learn, you'll be challenged, and if you rise to it, there will be equity on the table, actual ownership, earned, not gifted. My heart stopped. What? Why? Because I've met a lot of people with talent, he said, but very few with character under pressure. You didn't know anyone was filming you. You didn't think it was part of the race. But you acted anyway. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything yet, he replied. Just listen. He tucked his hands in his pockets, looking at the horizon like he could already see a version of my future I didn't even dare imagine. I built an entire branch of my company around mobility, logistics, urban infrastructure. We work a lot with people who drive old cars just to survive, people who hustle every day, overlooked by everyone else. We create financing models, repair programs, access to safer vehicles, that kind of thing. I nodded slowly. Okay. You'd be perfect for that division, he said. You know the world from the inside out. You know what it's like to depend on a car that doesn't love you back. You know what it's like to feel invisible. My throat tightened. He wasn't wrong. And? I asked. And I believe you can help build something better, something real, but you won't do it as a victim of life. You'll have to step forward as someone who takes responsibility. I swallowed. That's a lot. He nodded. Yes, because you're capable of a lot. I looked away, overwhelmed. What about the race? We finished it, he said simply, just not in the way you expected. I felt a sting behind my eyes again. So you're saying I won? He smirked. I'm saying you passed. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Louise clapped me gently on the shoulder. Man, you did good, he whispered. David checked his watch. I have a meeting at 9. Come by my office at noon. We'll talk details. I blinked at him. Noon? Today? Yes, he said. Why wait? He started walking toward his BMW, then paused and turned with one last thought. Oh, and Ethan? Yeah? Don't be late. It's strange how moments that feel like the end of something turn out to be the beginning of everything. That afternoon, I walked into David Stein's office, a glass tower overlooking the city that had always felt too big for me. But for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt aligned. We talked for hours about work, roadmaps, values, where I fit, where I needed to grow. He didn't promise me the world. He promised me the tools to build mine. And that was more powerful than any fantasy of winning a race. 3 years later, I'm the one sitting in a glass office overlooking Atlanta, not as a millionaire, not yet, but as someone building something that matters, as someone who shows up, as someone who chooses, as someone my father would be proud of. I still drive the Civic sometimes, not because I need to, but because it reminds me who I was before life cracked open and showed me something else. People at work ask me why I keep it. I always give the same answer, because every time I look at it, I remember the day I finally hit the brakes. Not to quit, but to become. Because that's the truth nobody tells you. Sometimes the fastest way forward is stopping at the exact right moment. Life isn't a straight race. It's a series of choices, each one revealing who you're becoming. And the world responds, eventually, inevitably, to the person you decide to be. If you're still listening to my story, I want to ask you something. What race are you in right now? What moment is asking you to choose who you are? Tell me in the comments. I read as many as I can. And if this story moved you, even a little, hit subscribe. There's more I want to share. More stories that remind us that life changes the moment you do. Because if a guy in a junk car can rewrite his story, trust me, so can you.